You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we move beyond the boundaries of the traditional options and derivatives scene and go out into the crypto space, see what's lighting it up from a volume and volatility and skew and all those fun perspectives. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from this fun network. Hopefully you guys are enjoying them. I see the numbers, so I know that you guys are flocking in en masse. If you just listened to the Crypto Rundown, you're missing out on a whole bunch of other great content. Maybe you're new to the options world, in which case Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio, great starting points for you to sink your teeth into options. If you like all the stuff we talk about here, like volatility and skew and all that good stuff, then maybe the Volatility Views or Option Block program will be more up your alley. A lot of things you guys sink your teeth into. Make sure wherever you're listening to this, subscribe to our full network, A, and B, leave a review for other folks so they can continue to discover the fun program that is the Crypto Rundown, and of course, our Options Insider Radio Network as a whole. Let's get those questions coming. We do love to hear from you guys. And joining me on the program today, they're back, folks from Crypto Patterns, Mr. John PEARLSTONE. John, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thank you so much, Mark. Great to be back.
All right, a lot to break down, John. Let's kick it off with the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down the world's leading crypto asset. Yep, we're talking about all things Bitcoin. Johnny picked a good one to come on because a lot of things popping off in the world of Bitcoin and crypto indeed this week. You know, John, in fact, it's been a while since you guys have joined us here on the program. It's been at least a few months here. And a lot has happened, of course. We were threatening 9,000 to the dark side not too long ago. And then, of course, rallying past 10,000 and then now past 11,000. And then this week, past 12,000 again to the upside before falling off back hard a little bit coming into the show. Now we're at about a little over 11,900, so about 11,910. That puts us up over 500 handles from where we were last show. So a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of round levels out there, John, which I know are interesting for a lot of technicals. So let's start there. Walk us through the last few months for you guys as Bitcoin was kind of flirting to the dark side at 9,000, then struggling to make 10,000, and now the last couple of weeks it's been on the rampage. Walk us through what all that's been like for you guys over there at Crypto Patterns, and what are the technicals telling us about all these movements, sir?
Okay. Well, if you remember our last discussion, we had said that we've been long the whole time. 9,500 is kind of, ground zero for Bitcoin at this point. And if you look at it, it's pivoted around there for months. And I think I shared with you, and I think it's proven out that indicators, all the charts, the patterns, all the things technical analysts want to really focus on, you just can't put too much stock in them, at least till recently, because they're just playing games. And finally, you're starting to see some meaningful moves. But I guess I'll have a theme today, which is until further notice, everything in Bitcoin, and we can talk about some altcoins, and I'm sure we will, but everything in Bitcoin until further notice is a retest of the early 2019 high, which was just under 14,000, 13,868 to be exact off Coinbase's numbers. And we've got a volume divergence right now where we're not seeing the level of trading going on at these higher levels that we saw when it was there in early 2019. So caution signs are up, definitely bullish, but this is an important time. Things have to break out here. We're going to have a problem.
You think some of that has to do with just the seasonality? I mean, we're hitting these, or I should say retesting these highs, but not at usually a very active time for the market. We're coming into the dog days of summer. These are traditionally light and thin times for all of the assets, including crypto. You think that has something to do with it, or maybe there's something else lurking afoot out here in Bitcoin right now, John?
I do, and you might recall some of the themes we shared I really think have proven out, so hopefully your listeners have benefited. I'd like to think they have anyway. I mean, we've mentioned the relationship with gold, and gold, as you know, has gone to new highs. Silver is going crazy. So that is probably more of a meaningful, I wouldn't call it seasonality, but event that's affecting people's transitioning over to Bitcoin than time of year, which, with a worldwide audience, 24/7 trading, and also just all the chaos going on in the world, we haven't put a lot of stock in seasonality patterns simply because there's never been a time like this that I could remember. I imagine most people would agree with that.
Yeah, and that's what we've been saying in a lot of our other programs as well, like our Volatility Views program. We talk about volatility or some of the other programs, and all those assets have been, doing strange things of late. And usually this is the typical time of year where you expect quiet things, and yet this is obviously far from a normal year. So it's kind of hard to look at the traditional seasonality when there's so many other irons in the fire right now that are just gumming up the works from an analysis perspective. But, we just came off the halving. That was an interesting period there where Bitcoin kind of languished around the 10,000 level for a while. Vol kind of came in pretty hard, and we didn't really see a heck of a lot of anything. One of the big questions leading into the halving was what's going to happen afterward, and for quite a while afterward, a whole heck of a lot of nothing was the answer. And now all of a sudden we're starting to see this aggressive uptick out here yet again. Has it been a busy time for you guys? Walk us through leading into the halving. Was it a big time for people hitting you up on the technical front? And then, of course, coming out of it, have you been interested and or surprised by first this kind of dearth of activity and now all of a sudden this very rapid explosion of activity in the last couple of weeks, John?
I've found it to be pretty similar to prior Bitcoin bull cycles. People become aware of Bitcoin and aware of altcoins, and then they start diving in or asking a lot of questions. So absolutely, we've had a lot more interest, a lot more requests for, our newsletter, our commentary, our, Forbes. We do quite a bit of commentary for them. So things have definitely picked up. And what we're looking for is we want it to be real in terms of buying. And both the futures and the cash prices aren't there yet. I mean, there's definitely a good increase in volume, but, it always makes sense to look at the historical patterns. Even though you can't put full reliance on them, you still want to compare. And wouldn't it be nice to know more people are buying aggressively at higher prices now than last time around? That has not happened yet. The other thought I'll throw out that you may want to talk more about later in the show is some new advents in crypto. Most notably, you may have heard the term DeFi. That's the latest buzzword, decentralized finance. And some of these coins make Bitcoin look like a money market with the volatility they're going through right now. But that is the next wave. And that is something we're hearing more and more about. We're seeing, we're studying, and we can talk more about that as we get further into the discussion.
Yeah, DeFi has certainly been on the radar for a lot of our guests on the show over the last few months. The Genesis folks are just on last week. They were talking about it. Other guests recently have as well. So a lot to break down in the DeFi space. Before we get to that, let's keep rolling on here into all things Bitcoin. A lot of these data coming to you courtesy of our friends over there in SKUland, SKU.com. Kick the tires, light the fires over there for yourself. It's still free, listeners, so take advantage of that while the getting is good. Realized vol come into today's show. It is up slightly, but pretty much about unched. It was 51% on our last show, 53% coming into this show, which shows that we're kind of meriting the current level of vol, around 50% out there right now. It's not really coming off. It's not coming up. We're moving enough to stay right at that level. Remember, realize vol listeners is what the actual level of volatility that the market has experienced versus what it's pricing in the future, which is implied, which is coming up next year. The 30-day implied right now is down a little bit, down to about 61% from 66%. So things are getting frothy. It was over 70% not too long ago out there in 30-day implied. It has come in a little bit, even though we have seen big swings, not enough perhaps to maintain that around 70-odd% level we were not too long ago. The skew also moving a bit, getting a little bit more negative. It was about 6.5% on our last show. This time it's minus 8.4%. If you don't know what that means, check out the episode we did with the folks who run skew so they can break down all that data for you and how to kind of analyze it and parse it. We had a discussion about that very topic on that episode. So check out our archives if you haven't done that yet. Call the put out there also down a little bit. It was very call heavy last week at about a 75%. So despite the fact that we broke through the 12,000 strike this week, the put ratio has actually come in a little bit. It's down to about 66% from 75%, which is kind of interesting. Maybe this recent retreat off somewhat aggressive retreat off the 12,000 strike, maybe that spooked some people. Either way, or maybe we just blew through all their upside strikes and they had to take them off or roll them. Either way, the call is coming off a little bit this week. In terms of OI, let's see where we're standing. The OI is pretty much holding firm this week. Hasn't really changed a lot to the upside or to the downside. We saw the big spike well north of 2 billion total across all the platforms not too long ago, right towards the end of July. Of course, July came off the board then, and now we're starting to see August start to rally up here a little bit. But we're pretty much unched from where we were last week, maybe a little bit lower, about 1.4 billion open on Deribit. This is, again, notional. A big goose egg still for back, to big zero on the options front for back still. So waiting for that one to kind of kick back into gear, yet not so much this week. CME, 168 million worth of notional. LedgerX, 51 million. OKEX getting into 100 million, 101 million out there. So OKEX starting to flirt with CME numbers out there. So as of coming into today's show, we saw Deribit doing, looks like about 95% of the OI out there right now. So that's still the big dog out there. OKEX coming on, though. These numbers are weird, though, because they're saying 95% and then 5% for OKEX and then 1% for LedgerX. If you do the math there, listeners, that's over 100%. So I'm thinking this data here is a little bit wonky for the over. They show CME with 0%. I know they have a little bit more than that. So a little bit of a weirdness on that chart there. Let's look on out to the week that was out there on Deribit. There's still the big dog out there from an overall Bitcoin options perspective. And 2 weeks ago on our show was still the big day for the last few weeks out there. Over half a billion, I should say, worth of notional. 527 million, 55 million on OKEX. That was the big dog. This past week, nowhere really near that. The big day was on the 6th with about 178 million worth of notional out there. Let's look really quickly what were some of the big trades lighting it up on Deribit. Weird stuff afoot. Not a lot of huge blocks, no 500 lots. A lot of 250 lots flirting around out there. Let's pick up a few of those, including a weird one on the 6th. That same day I just mentioned was the most active day. There was a 250 lot of the DEES, 32,000 calls, listeners. Going up for 0.0181 back when Bitcoin was closing in on 12,000, 11,824. So either someone was overwriting that for a pittance or taking a crazy flyer. We don't have a side on that. But still, 32,000 calls. I think that's the first time I've seen that strike pop up on my radar. The rest of the stuff was more strikes you probably would expect. 13,000 calls in August 200 times, 11,000 calls in August 200 times, 250 a lot of the DEES, 8,000 puts, so someone maybe putting the fade in there a little bit. AUG, 9,500 puts, 200 times. So those are some of the bigger strikes. But that 32,000 call strike certainly caught my eye out there. The big trades today, again, not a super active day out there. Deribit, about 600 of the AUG 12,000s. Well, that's not exactly a surprising number, given the fact that 12,000 strike is kind of where the action is. John, I'm curious for you guys over there at Crypto Patterns. I kind of joked about this earlier, but it probably bears fruit. Do you see an uptick in interest, an uptick in activity for you guys whenever Bitcoin is circling around these very, very, straightforward levels like a 12,000? Is that really a big uptick for you guys? People start discovering the technicals when we break through these round numbers?
I think it's every bit as valuable of an indicator as all the technical stuff we go through. I mean, I stay affiliated with multiple forum groups and trading rooms and whatever. And you want to know what people are saying and thinking. And it's a great indicator. And it's usually a contra indicator, I hate to say. So yes is the answer to your question. Way more communication going on. Everybody who was in before is back and wanting, they've got their latest picks. All kinds of new people showing up, starting to get their first positions. It's, building up a froth for sure.
It's kind of what I figured. We see that in a lot of other asset classes as well. Whenever you pass some nice round level, people just tend to fixate at it for whatever reason. Now we're well past 10,000. Now we're past 11,000 now. So 12,000 is the next round number. We're flirting with it. I kind of figured that might be ginning up a little bit of activity over there on your platform as well. Speaking of activity on the platforms, let's see where the paper is aggregated these days. It's out in August across the expiration months with nearly 50,000 contracts open out there. By way of comparison, the most recent big dog was June with over 100,000, about 114,000. July never really got close to that level. August is doing all right. September is starting to come along a little bit with about 39,000. I would expect September as a quarterly. Obviously, it has more time to go. And also, as you said before, the crypto folks have a fascination with the quarterlies. I expect September to overtake it and really become the big dog pretty soon out here. D's starting to kick on as well, about 20,000 contracts open out there. The rest are kind of anemic. Let's roll on out to the big strikes. We were talking for a while about the 11,000 and the 10,000 strike. Well, those are kind of in the rearview mirror now. But 11,000 is still pretty sizable. It's the big dog, just ever so slightly. 12,400 contracts open on the 11,000 strike versus 12,300 open on the 12,000 strike. So neck and neck with those two. 10,000 in the rearview mirror with 10,000 even, appropriately enough, open on that strike. We're also seeing some interest on the 14,000 strike here with looks like about 10,600. So I guess we're skipping 13,000 altogether. No love there. It has been weird how the strikes have worked out. We talked for a while about how folks were fixating on 11,000 and ignoring 10,000 altogether when we were back down around 9,000. So the way these strikes have played out over the last few months has been kind of interesting, to say the least. What's been not so interesting is Bitcoin options over there at CME over the past week. It's been decent paper, nothing really to write home about 100 to 200 contracts a day. The big day in the last few weeks was still that big print we talked about last show on July 28th, about 1,100 contracts going up. I believe it was a vertical that went up out there on that day. Other than that, we've seen some paper going up. Remember, that's a beefy 5X contract, so it's the reason why the size is maybe a little bit smaller, but still not a ton of paper out there. Decent paper on the futures. I know, John, you like to watch the spot, but you also pay attention to the listed futures over there in CME. Anything catching your eye out there from a volume or a trend perspective, sir?
Yeah, two things. Number one is the volume divergence I mentioned, where we've had good increase in volume, but nothing significant. In fact, a little less than what we saw last time we were up at these levels, and even a little higher. So we'd like to see that go in the favor of the new buying, given that theoretically the market's expanding, right? So you'd want to see more of that. The other thing is there's just, and again, I discount them, but I still want people to know about them. Tons of bullish patterns on the daily, the weekly, and even the monthly charts, whether it's moving average crosses, inverted head and shoulders. I mean, they want you to think this is a bullish chart if it's not actually a bullish chart. I guess that's why I'd phrase it. The one thing that is noteworthy is getting a bit overbought. And that usually means fast move. So what we're looking for now is some sort of resolution to this grinding higher from 9,500 to 10,500 up, now touching 12. I think our number is 12,500, by the way. We think that's when you'll see some reaction where if it passes it with some good volume, should go right to those prior highs. And then these patterns all seem to converge at 17,500. So that's the bullish case. And that's what we'd like to see to make sure this is going to keep going.
17,500. So a little bit south of that, 32,000 strike I just talked about earlier, where someone was buying options.
Bitcoin's yeah, right. But Bitcoin's famous for those massive, wicks. So who knows? Maybe the guy knows something we don't. It goes 32,000, comes right back to 17.
Yeah, that 17,000 may sound outlandish, but then you put it in the context of 32,500. It sounds comparatively normal and reasonable, John.
I see stuff like that. I'm always like, okay, it's going there because it just seems so outrageous that somebody must know something. But we're not trading it. Let's phrase it that way.
There was some guy, I'm trying to remember who he was, and he made headlines like over a year ago now, I think, when he came out and bought some ridiculous option OTC, obviously on Bitcoin. I think it was like a 50,000 strike, and he paid some ridiculous premium for it. And he put it out. He must have put out a press release. He was obviously a bull, and he obviously wanted to get some proud. I'll have to go dig in and see who that person was and exactly what strike he was and how much he paid. But it was something absurd. I think it was even beyond the 32,500 strike. So he's obviously got, maybe he's buying these as a bit of a more rational buy, John. These are comparatively better than whatever the hell.
That's beyond my pay grade. I don't know what those guys do, but they do seem to know things we don't. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we got a listener asking, I think, a little bit later about the 20,000 strikes. So everyone's got some crazy, outlandish strikes out there in their eyes. Let's see what's outlandish out here in the futures. Like you mentioned, a decent day on the options. Let's see what the futures are keeping pace here. Actually, a pretty decent volume day. Over 10,000 contracts on the tape as of the start of the show. So pretty decent paper. Not blowing the doors off, but certainly far from nothing. And then last Friday was 11,500. Thursday a little bit lighter, 6,000. Wednesday was a big day of the week, 13,000. Tuesday about 8,000. Monday about 6,300. So the futures have been going in fits and starts of late. Some weeks blowing the doors off, 20K a day, 20K a day. And other days not so much. We're kind of in that weird, again, we're in that weird time normally for the markets. Now you add in the wrinkles of civil unrest here in Chicago and in the U.S. You add in, of course, the pandemic. You add in some tensions with China and everything else. And who knows what the hell kind of cocktail we're all sipping from right now, listeners. Over there, our friend on the backed volume bot breaking down the backed futures. Remember, big goose egg for the options. A little bit better on the futures front, 5,427 as of their last update here. That puts them up about 8%. And still their all-time high is about 12,200, so not really close to there. And the OI on the futures about 24.6 million, puts it down about 6% out here. All right, John, anything else on your radar for Bitcoin before we move out into the altcoin universe, sir?
I just would say, if we see you every month or so, things should be dramatically different the next time we talk. That's what we see on the charts right now. This has been a very interesting progression, kind of keeping everybody guessing, and we think the guessing's about to come to a head. That's our take on it.
I think we can probably say that for about everything this year. Just about week to week. Every week is different than the last, and usually not for the better. Hopefully it'll be for the better this time, John, as we transition into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. You know what time it is. Time to explore all those other fun crypto products outside of the Bitcoin. Step for here, the top 10, where we break down all the biggest action out here. Remember, take this market cap with a grain of salt, but the rankings probably have a wee bit of value to them. Number 10 in the top 10 out here, Binance Coin, $3.2 billion. Number 9, Cardano, $3.7 billion. Number 8, Litecoin, holding firm around that number 8 level for a while now, $3.8 billion out there. Number 7, Bitcoin SV, $4.2 billion. Number 6, Chainlink, $4.6 billion. Talked about them not too long ago, making their foray into the top 10, up to number 6 now. Number 5, Bitcoin Cash, $5.6 billion. Number 4, Tether, $10.01 billion. Numero Trace here, XRP, $13.2 billion. Number 2, ETH, $44.6 billion. Number 1, the big dog, of course, Bitcoin, a little over $200 billion, about $220 billion, so back over the 200B level out there, which is kind of interesting. John, I know you guys like to pay attention to some of the altcoin out there as well. What's been catching your eye in the altcoin universe since the last time we chatted, sir?
Well, you've covered Chainlink. I mean, that's parabolic at this point, and that's kind of that entry-level DeFi coin. So that one certainly is something we're watching. Volumes picked up, prices going crazy. Two other ones that are not, they're coming up towards the top 10. I don't have my platform open in front of me, but they're top 25 for sure. Is basic attention token, BAT. That's moving far faster. It's been around a while. That's what makes it interesting. The chart has meaning, and it's moving at a much faster rate than the rest of the altcoin market. And then Tezos, I believe it's pronounced. They're number 13, and seeing some interesting moves there. And I mentioned last time you and I met about Overstock and how they are a bit of a crypto play because they own an exchange called T0, And Overstock was, I think, $12 when we spoke. It's $112 as of Friday. So it's done fairly well, but for other reasons. But it is a crypto play as well. And they're running all their stuff on Tezos, however you pronounce it. So those two are worth looking at because we see extraordinary movement that isn't related to DeFi, which is kind of new and unreliable information. But these guys have been around, right? BAT, Basic Attention Token, and Tezos.
So I like having you on, John. You always bring some interesting altcoin to the party. I'm curious, I know in the past you've been somewhat dismissive of the efficacy of technicals on a lot of the altcoin because you thought it was pretty much all Bitcoin all the time and the rest kind of just languished and didn't really have a lot of merit or meaning in their signals. Are you still feeling that? You think some of these ones you just mentioned are starting to buck that trend?
I'm so glad you remembered that. Makes me feel good because I remember we talked about Ripple and I said technically it should be going to zero, but it'll be back at 30 at some point, and here it is. That's the way they're working. And to answer your question specifically, just go look at the chart of the mini crash of last week, and nothing was immune. So Bitcoin still rules the roost, and no one's going anywhere without it. Is our take on it until proven otherwise.
Yeah, so I get the big bucks here in the hosting chair, John. I tend to remember a thing or two. It helps. It helps with the hosting gig here on the old program. Let's see what else is lighting it up out here in the altcoin universe. ETH, of course, the number 2 out there, the other big dog we've been talking about a lot. It's really been lighting it up a lot of late, not just from an underlying perspective. That's certainly been blowing the doors off, but also from a volume, volatility, all the fun different analytics we like to crunch here on the show. Coming into showtime, we got ETH threatening the 400 level, up about 437 just from last show. So 397 and change coming into today's show. So another good week here for the ETH bulls. Not quite as aggressive net on the week as we have seen some other weeks, but still anything to the upside for the bulls you can't really look askance at. Realize vol is holding firm out there. The stock, or the underlying, I should say, really is still moving. It's up to about a 74%, so it's meriting a pretty aggressive level of volatility. Implied, though, that's, of course, the level of vol that they're pricing in the future, listeners, from the option pricing. That's actually coming in a little bit. So that's down to about 79% from 93%. So realize holding firm, implied coming in a little bit. It's kind of interesting out there. Our ADV on the options front still ticking up to about 24 million. It was about 20 million on our show last week. The biggest spike is on the 7th. That was about 35 million worth of notional, plus kicking another 3.2 million on OKEX. OKEX really starting to come up on the rearview mirror there on a lot of these big players out there. They're no joke in terms of what they're putting up overall volume-wise. Again, from an overall volume perspective, it was a decent week out there, but not blowing the doors off, even though our OI now is looking pretty firm. We were talking about this with the Genesis folks last week, how ETH has just blown through the July highs, and it's pretty much double that now. It hit a high of about 165 million in June in terms of OI for ETH options, and now it's about 333 million. That's just on Deribit, another 31 million on OKEX. That's pretty decent. Actually, they were higher. There was closing in, looks like about 375 or so, not too long ago. So some of that has actually come off a little bit since then. So we've seen well over 2x in terms of the OI growth out there in ETH. So the ETH options are lighting it up. Ripple down a little bit on the show. Coming into today's show, we're seeing Ripple still about, actually not quite north. We were north of the 30 handle last week, 31 cents. Now we're about 29 cents. So just shy of that 30-cent level, but certainly not threatening 10 cents to the downside again or anything along those lines. Wish I could have some good options activity to parse for you on Ripple. Not quite there yet. Hard to have a ton of option size on an underlying that's 30 cents. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV also up a bit. Actually, I should say, take that back. Bitcoin Cash up about 263. Bitcoin SV, though, down about 12 and a third from last show. John, any other altcoin lighting up your tape before we welcome the listeners on for a few of their questions, sir?
It seems like there are some questions, so maybe I can, get it all tied together.
All right, let's do it then. It's time for your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to your segment. I mean, the whole show is your show, but this is where you guys get to dictate the pace here. Talking about your questions. First up, appropriately enough, question about ETH. This one comes from Lady Ain. She was listening to our last show. Of course, we had the Genesis folks on last show, and they're all about ETH. I mean, they hang their hat on a lot of ETH. In fact, I think we called last week's show ETH, ETH, ETH. because there was so much talking about ETH. Well, Lady Ainge was obviously listening to our show last week. She said ETH can also be bought in your tax-sheltered accounts with a big smiley face. So she just wanted to point that out. So apparently she wanted to, if you're curious about perhaps using ETH in some of your tax-sheltered accounts, Lady Ainge wants you to know. You can put it out there as well. John, again, ETH has been a fascinating story to watch as well. You mentioned some of the DeFi stuff. There is this, in fact, one of our last guests, I think it might have been the Genesis folks, pointed out something interesting, that there's ETH itself, which is the trading vehicle we talk about here a lot on the show. Then there's, of course, this entire ETH ecosystem of related projects that is almost worth, if not worth more than ETH itself right now. So there's a couple of different plays at work out here, and that kind of gets to what you're talking about earlier with this whole DeFi universe. Maybe we have a new segment called the DeFi universe coming up here, given how hot this is. Is this one that's really been lighting up your tape of late, John?
Well, it always is. And it's when people are like, okay, I own some Bitcoin. What else is there? It's the first one everybody becomes aware of because there are major players connected to it. There's a ton of developers. As you said, there's a very developed ecosystem. The overriding issue on ETH, and the point I was going to make, might as well cover it here, is that ETH doesn't really work. They still cannot get their speed and the scalability anywhere close to what they need to operate these things that are being developed on the Ethereum platform. So that's what I wanted to point out is we think there will be a shakeout. It might take 6 to 12 months. It might be faster. Certainly the trading might be faster. So watch for that, meaning all these other platforms that are far further along in scalability. I mention EOS every time I'm on your show. And it is, I believe they said it's something to the order of 30 to 40 times faster than ETH. But there's various reasons people haven't converted over to it. And there's been some talk about some merging, not of the two platforms, but ways to make the scalability through EOS, but operating on ETH, stuff I'm beyond my ability to understand. But just saying there's going to be some chart patterns that emerge, some volume, some sales, some pricing in the platform market that competes with ETH. Cardano comes to mind. Tezos comes to mind. These ones that are doing what ETH does, but a little differently and a little further along in the scalability. But no one can touch ETH in terms of its acceptance, its awareness. So we see it like Yahoo back in Internet 1.0, where it's probably going to go up first and fastest, but it may not be the winner when all this is said and done. So it's good to learn about what else is going on in DeFi and what people are developing on.
I like that analogy. ETH is like Yahoo in the Internet 1.0. John, though, I've learned that there are some pretty devoted ETH heads out there. They're probably going to get pretty mad at you for saying that kind of stuff. So direct your hate mail to John at Crypto Patterns, not to me here.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I make the analogy to the gold bugs. I used to say the gold bugs were the most just voracious in terms of their defense of all things gold. If you said anything bearish about gold, forget about it. Now, I think it might be the ETH heads, might be the new number one, John. So
you know who I see Bitcoin as? I might as well get them hating me too. Bitcoin is AOL. So there you go.
I like that.
Now they can all write me.
There you go. Now they can all. CryptoPatterns.net is the place to go to send all of your angry mail. Let's see. Let's move on quickly to see if we can wash away the taste of that, John. Next up, we've got Amkar Godbole. If I butchered your name, I apologize. He was listening to our last show as well. We were talking about all things ETH and also Bitcoin. He wanted to know, what is the probability of Bitcoin rising to 20,000 by the year end, according to the options market? He said a few days ago it was about 4,000, I guess. He says he's asking because Bloomberg analysts expect Bitcoin to reach 20,000 by the end of the year. It sounds like that 17,500 strike, John, is pretty nominal. I love this, though. I love, before we even had a chance to answer this, one of our other guests chimed in and answered it for us. I love we have a whole little ecosystem here, a community. It was the Genesis Vol guys again. They said at the time this question came in, it was about a 10%, which looks about right for what they're pricing in out there. So 10%, we're going to hit 20K by the end of the year there, Amkar. John, what are your thoughts on that relatively optimistic outlook for Bitcoin, even from Bloomberg, by the end of the year, and all these levels we're talking about, these outrageously bullish levels we're seeing out there in Bitcoin, John?
I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I think the stage is set. I think, it's in the news. The awareness is there. This is the best chance for it to happen I've seen. But, again, some key factors have not emerged, so I wouldn't go much above 10% in my estimations either. But I can at least tell you the patterns, the charts support it. And if it happens, it should happen very quickly.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. So Amkari may be smiling. Maybe you're out there playing on that 20,000 strike, in which case what the vol is out there on those. Just be careful. Obviously, things get a little bit wider the farther out you go, and also the farther away from the at the money you go. So bear that in mind. Oh, interesting. This was a nugget. Again, the Genesis guys have been all over the show. Like, they chimed in as well. This was something we talked about recently on our TWIFO program, but worth mentioning here as well. They kind of just pointed out a little interesting factoid where at the time, the at-the-money vol for September for Bitcoin was a 65%, and the at-the-money vol for silver, at least in the light of the SLV ETF, was a 66%. Now, to them, that seemed outlandish. They said these options are pricing in 45 days of vol, but one of these assets has rallied from sub 0.01 cents to 20,000 in 10 years, and the other hasn't. So to them, they thought that was insane. Given the recent move we've seen, remember, the options market and the volatility market is all about what have you done for me lately. And the recent move we've seen in silver certainly merits a wee bit of vol. Maybe you could argue it shouldn't be a 66, but it certainly has been moving a lot of late. If you want to see a deep dive into silver and all that kind of fun stuff on the vol front, listeners, check out our This Week in Futures options program that we do every week with CME and the FTSE Russell and a bunch of others over there. That's a fun one, and silver certainly has been on the rampage. John, I don't know if you look at the metals a lot out there, but what are your thoughts on these comparatively similar, in fact, equal, as of a few episodes ago, levels of volatility in silver versus Bitcoin, sir?
I don't see how you can ignore it. They've been correlated for some time. And my first thought was maybe there's hope for my 32,000 strike price call. Who knows? On Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's it. That's the hope.
But no, I think it's very interesting and supports what I'm telling you, which is there are many indicators that say if they're going to move, they're going to break this thing out and take it there fast. They're not going to just grind it up anymore. Yeah,
that's the case. Bitcoin vol versus silver. Another interesting topic for us to debate here, and probably on future shows. Doesn't seem like the vol in either one of them is going away anytime soon. Next up, Eli. How long until you think ETH and Bitcoin are available on all the major brokerage platforms? What about the options? Well, we've been kind of detailing that evolution ever since this show began, so over a year and a half now here, Eli, watching how the major platforms were slow to embrace them at first, and then taking different approaches to it. TD was part of RSX very early on. Now they're part of Schwab, so who knows what's going to happen there. Others, like IB and others, kind of waited for the big listed platforms to come on board, like with the CME futures. That was a contract they could sink their teeth into because it's from a venue they had actually heard of that was listed and regulated here in the U.S. So you're seeing a lot of those starting to dip their toes in on the CME futures. I mean, still not a ton of volume there, but we talked about it. They've been doing decent paper. The options, still a bit of a slower grind. We obviously have a few approved platforms here in the U.S., like LedgerX. They're starting to really work to revamp their platform. They're bringing in their vol index. We had Simon on a few weeks ago talking about that. So it seems like they're starting to make a play out there for a lot of you U.S. players, and they're a fairly decent active number. We talked about how much volume they're putting up. They're usually around a number 3 out there these days, going back and forth, maybe number 4, depending on where you look at it, with OKEX out there. OKEX coming on firm, but of course, not really available for you here in the U.S. right now. So it seems like, unfortunately, a lot of you are still kind of stuck with either the big dogs over there at CME, which is a big, beefy contract that's probably not suitable for a lot of you out there. Back, not doing any options paper, as you talked about, so I don't really know who that's suitable for right now. And then LedgerX kind of coming on there as well. So we want to get them back on the show to chat a little bit about what they're doing to improve and upgrade their platform, kind of make I guess you can call it kind of a bit of a LedgerX 2.0. So look for that coming soon here, listeners. But John, I'm curious for you. You must get questions like this all the time. What do you think here for our listener, Eli? How long until at least the top two, the two big dogs, ETH and Bitcoin, are available on all the big brokerage platforms?
We've said in the multiple shows I've been with you that we think that's what would break it out. So maybe there's something on the horizon. There was news about custody operations at many major financial institutions willing to take a lot of these major coins in custody now that they weren't willing to take before. So, you'd like to think 12 to 18 months, because why not at this point? Either it's going to get accepted or it's not, meaning there's not much more news to be had on these things. So I think sooner than later.
Yeah, I think the trend is certainly moving in the right direction. I think we still need a little bit of clarity here in the U.S. on the regulatory front. That's obviously gumming up the works. And with an election coming up and all these other things going on, it's probably going to slow that down a little bit, unfortunately. But yeah, we were trending. Again, I was kind of disheartened by the TD Schwab merger because that seemed like TD was really going to be in the vanguard of embracing crypto on a major platform, and maybe that's taken a bit of a step back now. And maybe that's caused others to have a little bit of pause as well. So it's going to be a little bit longer. And certainly for the options, it's going to take a while. We need to see platforms like LedgerX pick up a little bit more steam, or CME maybe launch a mini or something that's really going to drive a little bit of action out there. I've been on them about that. No real movement on that front yet. But maybe if these volume numbers continue to tick up, we'll see that. We need back to do a little bit of paper on something before we can really talk about that. But it seems like I guess the short answer is we're making moves in the right direction. I just don't think it's going to be as fast as maybe you would hope here, Eli. All right, last up here, we got Matthew. His question is kind of at the crux of our entire show here. He wants to know, what do professional options traders think of Bitcoin options? Well, hopefully, Matthew, you've been listening to our show from the beginning. It sounds like you might be a newer listener, in which case I encourage you to go back, check out our archives, because we've been kind of talking about that topic from the very beginning. That's kind of the perspective. That's the lens through which we view the crypto market. We come at it as options traders first and foremost. And we want to see what's going on out here from a volume, from volatility, from a skew perspective. Are things shaping up to make crypto really a viable place to hang your hat as an options trader? And, the short answer to that is it's getting there. It's not quite there yet. We've detailed many. I just talked about them with the brokers. Most of the major platforms still don't really embrace it. The options aren't really approved for the lion's share of our audience, particularly here in the U.S. yet, outside of a handful of venues. The ones that are approved aren't doing a ton of paper yet. The functionality people have come to expect on the bleeding edge of the option spectrum. If you go to launch an account at any of the major traditional brokers on the option side, you're going to get a lot of great bells and whistles, a lot of great tools, a lot of great UI. None of that's really there. I shouldn't say none, but a lot of that is still missing on the crypto front. The markets are still not there yet. As John alluded to earlier, the volume isn't there. The spreads are still wide. You get farther away from at the money front month, it gets pretty wide and crazy. So the ability to execute is still challenging. Of course, all the other things you have to worry about on the crypto front, you don't have to deal with in a stock, or things like custody and things. These are all other headaches. So there's still a lot of the plumbing, a lot of the infrastructure that needs to be put in place in the crypto marketplace to make it suitable for options traders to really come in and hang their hat. But the short answer is right now you can do it, and it's viable, much more than it was when we started the show even. So that's a good thing. But as we kind of mentioned with our last question, Eli, unfortunately, it's kind of the same answer. It still has a ways to go. It's getting there. It's certainly a heck of a lot better than it was. You can, if you're pretty deft and you're pretty savvy and you know what you're doing, come in here and make a living just trading crypto options. There's enough there to do, which wasn't the case too long ago. But it still hasn't reached that critical impasse level where people can really come in en masse and really start putting it in there alongside your Apples and your SPYs and everything else that you guys trade on a regular basis. John, I know you look at things more from a futures perspective. What are your thoughts here? Maybe let's flip the question around. What do you think professional futures traders think of the Bitcoin market, sir?
I think it's a hedge. I do. I don't think they're in there as their primary operations. They just, see opportunities to make money. It has an amazing correlation that appears to control the market. That much I'll say. So there's obviously some big players messing around in there, but I don't think that it's their bread and butter at this point at all. When you see that kind of staggered volume, and all of it's nobody's trading it for weeks at a time, then everybody's trading it. That's not a real market yet.
Unfortunately, that music means that is going to do it for our crypto question segment. It's also going to do it for this episode of the Crypto Rundown. I want to thank our guest here, Mr. John PEARLSTONE from the CryptoPatterns.net, for joining us here on the program today. John, before we go, if folks are intrigued, they want to kick the tires and light the fires over there, maybe they'll have some questions about technical levels over there in any of these different crypto assets we talked about today, where should they go? What should they do, John?
It's CryptoPatterns.net. You've said it a number of times. And, the contact information, subscription information, it's all on there. So all one word, CryptoPatterns.net.
let's leave them wanting more, John. So maybe let's leave them with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease. Anything you guys have up your sleeve, anything fun they can expect coming from you, the team at Crypto Patterns in the coming months. Have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
We have two things. Number one is we're really adding a lot of information to analyze these new and upcoming altcoins, which I think has been a real specialty of ours, finding opportunities like that. And with DeFi and the other related stuff, we're going to be a leader in finding opportunities there as it starts to expand. And then number two is we are going to be putting together a training program because we feel like our program is great for people just getting in the market or who want to rely on technicals and aren't so much into the sophistication of options and daily futures trading. We can get them information that lets them, trade like the big boys do while they're at a much lower scale.
There you go. Check it out for yourselves, cryptopatterns.net. On behalf of John and Dee myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for sending in those questions. Keep them coming. And we'll see you back throughout the week, of course. We don't just do this show. There's a bunch of other shows on the network. So if you're just listening to the Crypto Rundown, you're missing out on a whole heck of a lot. Head on over to wherever you listen to this. Could be Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, our website, wherever you get it. Make sure you check out the full kit and caboodle over there on the full network. And we'll see you back here next Monday for more of the Crypto Rundown.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.